But yeah, you have some couples that really do work together, right? Like they just make music together, and
I don't know how they do it and not kill each other, but
maybe they do kill each other.
Yeah.
I mean, I think most of them are dead actually. So it's yeah.
You've played with some of the most technically like advanced jazz musicians out there, like Steve Lehman, Peter Evans. I could go on and on. So I want to know, tell me in your words how you got from that world over all the way into the DJ Premier world. Like, what was that journey? Just lay it on me.
Well, I was already into DJ Premier's work before I ever got into piano. So like 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, I was already getting into hip hop. I was getting into Notorious B.I.G. and Big L and the Wu-Tang Clan. And of course, Premier worked with Big L. He worked with Big E. He worked with Nas. He worked with Jay. And that was just part of the culture of my area. There was a lot of hip hop. There was a lot of Black and Hispanic communities, and young people were just into hip hop at the time. So I was already into that. And then that kind of led me into wanting to get into music. I didn't know how the music was made. I just assumed it was always like live band with a rapper. And it used to blow my mind. I remember it blowing my mind when I found out that people were just sampling, records. Like it took me forever to finally figure that out. I was like, oh shit, that makes perfect sense. No wonder this shit sounds so good. But when I started learning piano, I started getting into classical music and started getting into jazz because there was a heavy jazz education emphasis in my area, New Jersey and New York. That's how I met guys like Tyshawn. That's how I met guys like Marcus Miller and Erwin Hall, Ryan Klackner, the great Alan Bjorklund, of course. So that's how I started getting into the jazz and improvised music thing. And I think through knowing Tyshawn and through knowing guys like Mark Stewart and the late great Colin Biederman, drummer, these were guys that were into like really advanced music as well into commercial music and hip hop and funk and all that. They were also really hip to like modern classical and avant-garde and modern jazz and all that stuff. So through their influence, I started taking an interest in the avant-garde, into things like Anthony Braxton or composers like Karl-Heinz Stockhausen or Giorgio Ligeti and things like that. And I think naturally, when you're in New York City or you're at Berklee College of Music and you're into that stuff, you start finding yourself around people who are into similar things. And at the time, the heroes of our time were like Greg Osby and Jason Moran, and then Tyshawn Sorey, Steve Lehman, Vijay Iyer. So like naturally, you start to gravitate towards that sound and that thing. There was like a common influence. And for whatever reason, some of those guys would call me for gigs. And I never felt like I was quite at their level. Like I remember playing with Peter and Steve Lehman on stage and just being like, these guys are at a completely different level, like really? Instrumental wise. Yeah, like that was a big factor in me wanting to go back into production in hip hop, where I was like, oh man, like there's levels to this as far as playing, and these guys are really committed to the craft on a whole other level. And I have to make decisions, like either I'm going to be completely dedicated on that level playing wise, or I'm going to fulfill my interests in things like hip hop and production, like I always wanted to originally. But yeah, performing with those guys, I think they called me, honestly, the reason I think I got those gigs was sight reading. Like the ability to read their music pretty, not easily necessarily, but I guess with less difficulty than maybe other people who weren't as good of sight readers.
Right.
And I think maybe just an overall confidence where, like as an improviser, where I was just down to play whatever and do whatever. And so lucky enough, I was able to play with those guys. Peter Evans was way more free in terms of his approach. And he was more about like, bring your personality to the music, do whatever you want. Steve Lehman was so much more of like, composer and scientific and methodical, and he really needs a certain level of technical expertise with what he's doing too. Peter Evans is as well, but Steve Lehman had a very particularly like scientific mathematic approach, which is really interesting, and he could improvise with that level of complexity too. So. Actually, with Steve Lehman, he had a band called the project that I worked with him on was Sélébéyone, which was like his approach to hip hop through, I guess, his lens with a mix of Senegalese influences, which he had. He had somebody in the band who was from Senegal and France, and French influence in terms of his interest in like spectral composition and all that. And that really got my juices flowing in terms of like thinking about hip hop again and what I wanted to do with it.
Really?
I was like, oh yeah, like this is really different and this is fun. And around the same time, I started really working with Brady Watt a lot, bassist and producer.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that more later, but working with Brady and working with Steve, kind of hip hop started calling me back, like.
I did not see that coming, dude.
Totally.
That I always pronounce it wrong. That album, is the name of the band is Sélébéyone. Am I saying it right?
I say Sélébéyone. I think that's how it's pronounced. Yeah,
amazing.
I may be getting album. It wrong over time. Yeah,
works. Whatever you say, that's how I'll attempt to say it. Amazing album. I didn't. Oh man, I could do a whole podcast about that album because we listened to it on repeat nonstop when it came out. Because it was groundbreaking to me in a way that, like you said, Steve Lehman's like scientific, very mathematical, but damn, it just grooves so hard. And the poetry over it, some of it being in French, like it just hits so differently. But I did not see that coming, that was like a spark for you to come back to your beginnings, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I mean, I was getting into production before that. Like I was using Ableton for a lot of stuff and just composing stuff. But I was kind of going more like the composer route on that. And then with Brady and Steve kind of happening at the same time, because with Brady, I was able to play gigs with Talib Kweli and produce music for like more current artists as well, because he works with a ton of artists. It was just kind of one of those things. It's like, well, I grew up on hip hop and I still listen to rap all the time and I'm into the culture and I'm into that whole thing and the fashion. And I live in Queens and I'm like, this is part of what I wanted to do in the first place. So yeah, no, Steve Lehman definitely had his influence on that because he's also a huge hip hop fan. But he kept it so much closer to what he does than... Like I wanted to just go full into like going in the studio and working with rappers, like not doing my version of hip hop from a jazz or a composer's perspective. Kind of like threw everything away and started over in that world.
But your ears probably changed so much on the second time around coming back to like hip hop production, all that, like just because of all your experiences with jazz. I'm gonna take it back a little bit. Because, man, you mentioned so many cool things. I just want to go off on like 800 tangents, so I'll try not to be ADHD. But take me back to, you said, you listened to hip hop growing up, but when you were playing piano, were you classically trained at first? Like, did classical music come and then you got into jazz? Like, walk me a little bit through that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was classically trained. I was somewhat. My first teacher was giving me a mix of classical and blues and jazz repertoire. He wasn't necessarily teaching me improvisation quite yet.
Okay.
But like some contemporary stuff, some classical stuff. And then I ended up taking classical lessons with classical teachers after that. So classical training was a part of it. But it was always kind of a mix of classical and jazz at the same time.
Okay.
So like I'm not as good as a classical pianist, you know, like I can play through some pretty difficult stuff, and I'm definitely proud of that. Like, oh yeah, I can play some pretty cool stuff. But I wouldn't like, you know, perform as a concert pianist, maybe not without like 4 or 5 years of practice. You know, but
no, totally get it.
yeah, but jazz and classical at the same time, I think. And that felt to me like a really Jersey thing too. Like everybody I had been around was into classical and jazz and modern music, and that was just part of what it was, I think. Looking back now, I see it was very unique, not just to Jersey, but kind of unique to, I think, certain parts of the country where there's all this diversity and
very cool. You kind of mentioned some people that we've mentioned a few times and have been on this podcast, Ryan Clackner, Tyshawn Sorey. Fill me in about how, like, the New Jersey scene you kind of mentioned there. Like, you were in NJPAC for teens as a teenager, I hear. You eventually went to news school, I believe. Do I got that right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Walk me through, I guess, like, I don't want to say the educational system, but the way I look at it is, man, like college wasn't about learning jazz so much as meeting the people. So yeah, totally. What was NJPAC like for you? Walk me through the whole process.
NJPAC was amazing. So where it first started was I did a summer program. It was a scholars program for minorities at Princeton University that I got invited to after my freshman year of high school. And at that program, there was a trombonist named Danny who kind of like talked me into learning jazz. He's like, dude, you gotta, because I was already learning piano. And I had heard a little bit about some jazz repertoire. Like I could play through some written stuff, like A Night in Tunisia, but it was like a written arrangement. He invited me to go to the Jazz Institute, which was run by an organist and pianist named Rodham Schwartz, who was from Jersey, who was living in Bloomfield at the time. And we were doing it at some basement of some like converted bank or something. And that's where I first met Tyshawn and Marcus Miller and Irwin Hall and the Ware brothers and Ryan Clackner and guys like that. It was through the Jazz Institute, which was like a small, basically like an ensemble class for an hour and a half. We would run through bop lines and learn repertoire and go out and play gigs. And, you know, he took us to go see Wynton Marsalis once. Which, funny enough, I found out later on that Aaron Burnett was the opener for that Wynton Marsalis gig. And we had become friends later on. And I was like, oh, shit, you were the opener.
That's cool.
So then from there, I found out about Jazz for Teens. Or I think my dad found out about Jazz for Teens by asking some of the other parents. And Marcus was a part of that as well. And that's where I met guys like Mark Stewart. And Tyshawn was also a part of that, and he was like our hero at that point. You know, he was just the man. He would sit at lunchtime and play piano, and some of the teachers hated it. Some of the, you know, because they were like straight ahead bop, and God bless them, they were great teachers and great musicians, but Ty did not give an F. Like he was sitting at that piano with a bunch of kids in the room eating like Subway sandwiches, and he's playing like the most out but elegant shit you've ever heard. And we were just completely, we couldn't wait till lunchtime to just get that concert. And he would just sit there and play all lunch, every single, like we were getting private shows. And
that was the real education.
Nobody really, people knew who he was, but he wasn't who he is now. And it was just like, this guy's he's the GOAT. He's the greatest. And so I think through his influence and through guys like Marcus Miller and Irwin Hall, who were like already playing great, the guys like Mark Stewart and Colin Biederman, who I mentioned, who are also NJPAC guys, Chris Aiello, great saxophonist and now like sound designer. And then teachers like Ralph Peterson, Don Braden, Mike Ladon. There was kind of this push to continue jazz education, to keep going with it. It was just kind of like your friends are going to Berklee or New School. So I ended up going to New School to study with Reggie Workman and to be around guys like Buster Williams and things like that. And I went there for one semester, had a blast, was starting to gig right away, which was like magical, and it gave me a lot of validation. But I remember visiting Mark Stewart at Berklee with Colin Biederman, and it just felt so peaceful and quieter. And I was like, oh man, you know what? Like, I do love New York, but I think I can come back to it. I want to go somewhere where it's quieter, where I can just focus on practicing and thinking about what I want to do. New York felt like I was already on the scene.
Right.
And I was already feeling that pull to like be somebody. And I just wanted to I still felt like I wasn't close to any level of being able to really have a voice out there. So I went to Berklee, went there for sound design because I didn't want to study jazz there. I have my thoughts on that. Like, I don't think it's even possible to learn jazz at school. And so I'm not going to go into debt for that. That's crazy. Right. So I studied sound design, got tired of that because they were just teaching stuff out of books for the semesters I was there. And I was like, well, I'll just read the books, whatever, and go hang out at studios. Dropped out, went back to the New School eventually after a bad breakup and trying to be a starving artist all by myself and all that crap. And after a couple heartfelt arguments with my parents, I finally went back to the New School and ended my college career there. And that's where I ended it. That's where I was done with education. And like, I haven't gone back to any of that since. Haven't taught anywhere. Not a fan of the jazz education world, but I did get a lot out of it. Like, I feel like I got what I got out of it. Like, Jersey was a special place. I think there was just so much available, and I met the musicians that I met. But I felt like I got more out of the high school stuff than I did out of the college stuff, to be honest. Yeah.
Huh. Wow. I had no idea that you were up at Berklee. I had no idea that history. Very, very interesting.
Crazy times at Berklee. Yeah. Crazy times.
Yeah, the Berklee scene, I don't know, I might be a few years older than you, but I went up there visiting around 2003, 2004. And yeah, it was a whole different scene than New York. It was very chill, like you said, but some monsters up there as well. But I feel what you're saying with like less pressure up there, like you can just like focus. William Patterson, where I went to school, and you're very familiar with that scene too, I know. It was similar because we were just in basically by Patterson, New Jersey, between Wayne and Patterson, and it's like you could still go to the city and be in that, and we did a lot of times. But the other cool thing was there was that Jersey scene, like Crossroads was still
in Garwood. Next to the Magic Grill.
Right. Yeah. And there's other places that are just not there anymore. But it was definitely a unique place, Jersey. Man, we could go down so many rabbit holes.
Honestly, before you do, looking back, if I could rewind time, I think I would, even though I want to keep the friends that I made at New School in Berklee for sure. Like, I met some of the greatest people ever. Looking back, I wish I would have done William Patterson, or I would have gone to Rutgers or stayed in Jersey and done something more affordable. That I probably could have gone there for gotten a little bit of a scholarship and looking back, meeting some people that were part of those programs, it was like, oh, that would have been such a great hang and great place to. So, if I could tell the youngins out there, it's like, don't fall for the glamour of some of these programs.
No.
Like go where you can really spend time practicing and developing your voice and hitting the books, and where there's less distractions. And a lot of times some of the best musicians in the world are going to be in these smaller programs. Like, William Patterson is absolutely legendary, and it's like probably better jazz education and improv education than Berklee or New School, to be honest.
It depends on the time period, and I have to agree with you that getting a jazz degree, it's funny how I'm trying to think how to complete my thought, but it's funny how you don't realize these things as you're going through it, right? Yeah. No one can tell you, you just have to like proceed through your life like we do every day. Like nothing really changes. But if someone would have told me, hey, if you go to jazz school, you're not going to learn shit about music. Like you could probably just move to New York and like be a waitress and figure it out and be fine. I wouldn't want future me to tell myself that, because like you said, you meet all these people. I mean, I met my now husband in college, some of my best friends, and just like opened my eyes to a world I didn't know existed. I wish we could like remake the education system so you're not wasting a shit ton of money.
Same.
But you know what I mean? But you still know. Now, I hate using the word network, but I don't have a better word for it. You network, you meet people, you jam, you play. There's a lot of late nights in practice rooms, a lot of drinking, but I mean...
Yeah, and I
don't think you need to spend tons for that.
Sorry, I think that if that were the case, that graduates would be more willing and likely to like donate and invest in these programs after the fact. And so instead of charging these 18-year-olds and forcing them to be in debt for 20, 30 years, whatever. And I'm lucky I was able to get through that very quickly. And that's like one of my main philosophies is like staying out of debt as much as I can as a creative. But yeah, I think like, these schools need to be more affordable, more supportive. And especially from the bottom up, like it's easy to support the kids that are already great at what they do. Yeah. Give them a full scholarship, put them on all the big, like there's that thing. But it ends up being everyone else who ends up running the industry and owning the clubs and, working at the studios and whatever the case may be. And some of those guys end up being the best musicians as well. And they kind of have a disdain for and a resentment for school. Like that's just a common conversation amongst musicians. Yeah. Is nobody's like, oh yeah, my college was amazing. It's always like, oh shit, I wish I didn't even have to go, or yeah, it was okay, but this, or the one that I hear a lot is like, oh well, the networking is great. I'm like, I knew a guy at Berklee that would just stand outside of Berklee, with cigarettes, and you would be like, hey, can I bum a cig? Oh yeah, of course, have two. You're like, oh, this guy's the greatest guy in the world. You sit and you talk with him and. Oh, what are you guys up to? Oh, we're about to play. Oh, can I jam with you guys? Yeah, I'll sign you in. No problem. He ended up knowing everybody at the school and hanging out in the practice rooms and getting gigs. Never paid a dime to Berklee. Just hung out front.
That's what's up. That's like some good old American entrepreneurship. That
was the best. The greatest guy ever.
In a different form. That's awesome. I love it. Yeah, I wanted to take kind of like a little turn. You mentioned... yeah, you're like, we'll talk about it later. Brady Watt on bass. How did you meet him? Like, how did that relationship start? Because you guys are making some amazing shit together.
Down, down. Come on, get it. Come on, get it. Come on, get it. Let's go. A child is born with no say of mind, blind to the ways of mankind. God is smiling on you, but he's frowning too, because only God knows what you go through. You'll go in the ghetto, living second rate.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure when we met, because he also went to Berklee.
Okay.
So I think we just knew some of the same people and maybe had run into each other. Maybe we had played before. I honestly don't remember. Berklee was kind of a blur for a lot of different reasons. That was kind of its own rabbit hole for me. but he actually reached out to me on Facebook, I believe.
Okay.
2016, 2017, around there. And he was like, hey man, like it's been forever. Would love to hang out. I have an apartment in Harlem. I'm cooking up and producing a bunch of music all the time. Let's collab. Let's cook up. Let's make some tracks. And I went over his place and we, he had a keyboard set up and I cooked up a couple things and, we collaborated on a couple ideas and he ended up producing those into like full tracks, beats and whatnot. And we ended up getting one of those placed on this guy, Bishop Nehru, who's a rapper, on his album called All of My Years, I believe. It's so long ago. And that was a really fun collab and a really dope track. And so me and him just kept working. I basically, I love to work. I love to work long hours, and I told him anytime you want to cook up, anytime you want to collab, just let me know. I'll come through if I'm available. Let's just work. Let's get it. Let's get placements. And that's how I started with Brady. And he has his live project called Lifetronics, or that's what it was called at the time. And he would book a couple gigs here and there, like Harlem and New Hampshire and Bitter End and some places like that. So we would play, some shows of his own original music. And that's how it started. And it kept going during the pandemic. He got stuck in New York, basically. And he's part of DJ Premier's label, TTT. He signed with the same manager. And they offered him some studio space.
Okay.
At DJ Premier's studio. At the time was in Astoria, Queens, which happens to be my neighborhood. And Brady was like, yo, I'm going to be in your neighborhood and let's cook. Let's collab. And I'm like, shit, we got nothing else to do.
Yeah.
Like we can go 12 hours a day if you want, my man. And it kind of just started from there. And we really developed like a strong collaborative. We have folders and folders of ideas and music and beats and tracks and samples. And we've gotten some cool placements together like Jack Harlow and West Side Gun. And we've worked with Premier a bunch. So, and he's gotten me a lot of opportunities and he introduced me to Premier.
Wow.
So I owe a lot to Brady. Yeah, he's just a great guy to work with and his work ethic is insane. And those are the kind of people I want to be around, and he's a brilliant content creator as well. So it's kind of easy to develop relationships with people like that when
Very cool.
And that's Brady's thing.
So when you were mentioning the Steve Lehman project earlier, it sparked interest going back to hip hop for you. Did you kind of, this sounds really hippie, new agey, but did you put like an intention out like, hey, I want to like thinking like I want to get back into hip hop and then Brady hit you up, or was it just like a synchronistic timing, or did that happen months apart? Like, I'm just curious.
I mean, not to sound too corny, but just to vibe with you, I think everything is kind of that for me. And
Nice.
So including Steve Lehman, like that's somebody that I wanted to work with for a long time. But yeah, no, totally. Because I really wanted to do the producer thing. I had that itch a while ago when I was, when I graduated new school. I got a chance to work with, his name is Henry Walter. His producer name is Cirkut. And his partner at the time was Adrian Goff, who was a saxophone player who I went to the Berklee 5-week with, and we have become friends. Cirkut ends up being one of the greatest producers of all time. Like he just won producer of the year at the Grammys.
I was gonna say,
he was on stage with Lady Gaga. Like he's the man. And watching those guys work, I mean, it was so intense and so productive, and their belief was insane. They're living in an apartment somewhere in Toronto. They had gotten one placement with Britney Spears, and they were like, we're shooting straight for the top. And I got a chance to work with them for a little bit and watch them kind of grow and add in my little creativity here and there. And so that's where I got the itch to be a producer. I came back to New York and I tried to get some people together to form kind of like a group, like a collective, to try to make some things happen. And I couldn't really sell the vision. And of course, you're broke in New York, you're playing gigs. You kind of, over time, I kind of worked my way back out of that producer thing of being in the studio and working with artists. And trying to get songs on big records and whatnot. So yeah, so that like Brady and DJ Premier coming along definitely came after, you know, me really sitting down and being like, how can I make this happen? Like I gotta be ready for it. And I'd say that one of the keys there is that because I wanted it, I had set myself up for understanding what it was going to take. Ooh. And the sacrifices and the time and the work ethic. And I think that really helped me when it came time to like work in that studio, like to solidify my place with those guys, because I was there every single day and I wasn't asking to get paid and I wasn't asking to be fed and I wasn't asking, you know, for them to cover this or that expense. If they wanted me there, I was there. If they didn't want me there, I was trying to be there anyway. And I learned that from Henry and Adrian because they understood that early on, which was like this psychotic work ethic you need. So kind of like the long answer to that question. Yeah, it wasn't by chance. Like there was definitely some intention on my part to like make something happen there for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like in how I'll reword it a little bit, but and tell me if I'm misunderstanding, but you kind of prepared for it mentally and realized what it was going to take with working with the guys. Sorry, I totally blanked on their names. The guys that you worked with.
So yeah, Cirkut and Adrian.
They kind of primed you for what it was going to take. So you already had that knowledge.
Yeah.
And you know, just made this space for it to happen no matter what it took. Am I kind of following you right there?
Yeah. They showed me it was possible. Because
that's the other thing too. Yeah, this is possible. It's amazing once, like, just humans in general, once we know something's possible and see that, how it can just change everything. Like, what's the story? Like, there's like the 4-minute mile. Like, no one said it could be done. That dude did it. I forget his name. And then it just broke open. Mm-hmm. You know, people are running 4-minute miles, no problem. I'm so uneducated. I forget the guy's name.
No, it doesn't matter. I mean, the idea remains the same, and you're totally right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just to add a little bit to that. It was this idea that most people don't try to do the impossible. So actually, there's almost less competition if you're willing to aim for certain things that are really high. There's almost like less competition to get there because nobody's really trying to do it. And, you know, I think about it in my life, the thousands and thousands of musicians that I met, and it's kind of remained true that like there's only a handful that really, you know, and it's subjective what success in the top is. So I'm not putting that same judgment on everybody. Right. But I think there is kind of a self-limitation where it's like, oh, I'm not good or powerful enough or meant to get to a certain level or achieve a certain level of success or wealth or whatever the case may be. Yeah. And when you see somebody who is like, F that, like you just got to go, like it's all about knowing where to go and making those moves and knowing how to fail and knowing how to flip situations, turning negatives into positives and just willing that. You just see it. You're like, oh, well, okay. It's like we're all humans here, you know, like even the most successful people on the planet, they're walking, breathing humans, making decisions. Yeah. So I can think a little bit bigger now. I love that. I can aim a little higher.
I've had a similar experience, not in the music world, but in business and entrepreneurship. I've been lucky to work with a lot of different entrepreneurs the last 15 years. And the thing they all have in common is that they're crazy. Like they are batshit crazy.
Yeah.
but in a good way. And I see, and I'll elaborate, but I see some of the best musicians I know, like we named a bunch of them already on this podcast, the most talented people, they are also batshit crazy in the best possible way, meaning they have grit. They don't take no for an answer. Nothing's impossible. They figure out how to make that 4-minute mile happen.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but I see like just the great American entrepreneur like spirit. I see that in a lot of the greatest musicians today, where they're just like, no, like I'm going to make this shit happen any way I can. I have this vision. My job is to just make it reality. And, you know, I see that in what you're saying too. Like, you're like, I saw it was possible and I did what it took, like not getting paid, like staying long hours. So, I'm going to get off my soapbox, but
no, that's perfect. You know?
I see that missing a lot in musicians now. Like our age group, especially, I feel like some people just give up and, you know, like, we all have our different paths, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
I
mean, failure is tough, you know. Failure is tough. And we all fail. Everybody fails. So it's dealing with that is its own journey. And I think that's where a lot of the, you know, the limitations begin. It's like the fear of failure and, I fail a lot. You know, like I screw up a whole lot.
Yeah. Fear of failure, fear of embarrassment is another one. Performing artists, I see a lot,
and it happens to the best of them. Yeah, I mean, everybody is. Yeah,
yeah. I just get sick of it. Like I just get sick of being like afraid of being embarrassed. Like even this podcast, I'm like, I don't even care anymore. I just want to share people's stories. I don't care.
Yeah, and
like
nobody cares.
Nobody cares at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
So thanks for coming on my podcast, Carlos. No one gives a shit.
Yeah. But that's what it is. I mean, everybody cares, but nobody cares. Like it's not that big of a deal. And that's the thing, right? With musicians is this kind of we all suffer it, is that self-importance and the, you know, everything's so deep and everything's such a big deal, and then you're in front of an audience, you're like, these are just people, man. Like let's just play some music. Like they're just here they're here to listen to some music, and we're here to play some music. Like it's not so much deeper than that.
It's not heart surgery.
Yeah, like relax. Like I can have a good day and then play a gig. It's not, you know, it doesn't have to be such a, and I've suffered that more than anybody, honestly. Like that's
think we all do.
Yeah.
I wanted to go down like a totally different route with you.
Sure.
And after this part of the conversation, I think it'll be interesting to have your thoughts. So as I said, I was stalking you a little bit, and you mentioned Erwin Hall earlier. You've played recently with him, I saw. And I was checking, like I check out Instagram nowadays. Like that's kind of like how I peer into people at first. And you had a similar post, and I wasn't like trying to find it, but he had a post recently about, maybe it's pinned or something, I can't remember, but about how he feels he's more of a channel for music. And I went back in your Instagram and I found a cool thing you said. I forget how you phrased it, but you were playing and you said something like, your caption was like, is it creating or is it channeling? And right. I just thought that was so cool. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that. Like, is there something, do you get as esoteric or not as you want? I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, I think we use the words that we know and that we understand to describe certain things. And it's hard to talk about music because it's hard to talk about music without sounding like a total douche, right? You know, it's just, it is what it is. It's like listening to actors talk and they get into that mode of like, well, so I thought, and you're like, oh God, here we go again.
Here we go again. Lay it on me.
Yeah. So when you're posting, you tend to, it's a little more intellectual, but, I think just from improvising so much, it's obvious to me that there's like, I'm not just sitting there playing one note at a time or two notes at a time. Sometimes you're letting go of a large amount of information and you're kind of, these sheets of sound, right? You're just kind of like creating these waves of sound and information and ideas, and it can get very intricate and it can get very like unreal. Like you listen back and you're like, well, where did that come from? Where's this stuff? And it's just obvious. Like, I'm definitely not sitting here and constructing every note and every sound. Some people might do that, and maybe those are the greatest geniuses in the world. They know everything they're playing, and maybe they don't. Who knows? But every great artist I've been around, there's a certain level of like, I don't know where it comes from. I don't know what's going on. Like I'm just creating. And so yeah, it's hard not to get into these conversations of like, well, are we channeling something? And if we are, what is it? You know?
Yeah.
Or is it just that maybe our thoughts and our mental, intellectual side just isn't that important? Like the voice in our head is just this, you know, just another guy at the table. Just, okay, maybe you're not the king of this table. And there's all these other things that we can't express that are just flowing through us. So it's, I don't know, it's hard to explain.
Yeah.
But I know for me, I try not to think
Yeah.
when I'm composing or creating. I'll have ideas and motifs that I'll develop and I'll have creative ideas for what to do with the harmony or the rhythm. So there's some thought involved, but for the most part, I feel like I am just trying to be a conduit for whatever's coming through, whatever beauty is trying to spill its way out of me. And if anything, it's just my taste and my personal judgment that's influencing the sound. So we're kind of like chefs, you know, we're you know, I didn't create beef, but I know how to doctor it up and I know how to work with it a little bit. And,
you know how to make a good steak.
Yeah, you know, so I don't know. It's a tough thing. I don't think there's any reality to hang our hat on here.
No,
I think it's a subjective.
I just love to
thing.
hear your take on it because the more I research different musicians and talk with different people like yourself, the more different takes I hear, and you know, reading biographies of like composers and then like getting ideas and dreams and like waking up and like writing this shit down, like where did it come from? And it's just like, first off, what? Second of all, how do you remember all that to write it down? That's a whole nother thing.
You know, I always wonder how much of that is creating the story, which I'm a fan of, by the way. I don't mind, and I'm not saying that I do this. I'm sometimes I'm not really smart enough to do this, but I don't care if an artist lies.
Oh,
I don't give
I
a
see what you're
damn.
saying. Yeah.
Create whatever story you want. I don't care. If I talk to you personally and I'm paying you for lessons and I ask you a question, you give me some bogus answer, I'm going to call you out on it and say, dude, I'm here to learn. Don't mess around with me.
Don't bullshit me.
Now's not the time to, but I don't care if an artist makes some shit up. Sometimes I really don't know, right? Like I'm not one to dream about a melody and then wake up and create the melody, you know. I might have a crazy dream and then be like, maybe I should write something that expresses that dream. But
that's cool.
No, but I do think it does go a lot deeper. Like I do think there are people who have an understanding or have an ability to perceive what's going on underneath the surface, and they have a language and they have a way to work with it. And I do think that there are some composers or just people out there who aren't just channeling, but they are creating from an even deeper place. And Tyshawn Sorey, who we mentioned, I think kind of the common conversation is like, what is this guy on? Like, where is he? Where is he getting this stuff from? How is he? And he's somebody who I think lives in the inner world in a lot of ways, and lives in the kind of hidden dimension, if there was one. And he's not just channeling. I think he is partaking in what's behind there, and maybe a kind of an architect from that perspective. And that may be kind of corny and new agey, but it's, as somebody who does this for a living, you know, you come across certain people that just seem to be different and have a deeper perspective and understanding. And it's not just words. It's not just like selling me on verbiage or, you know, nonsense. Like there's something really there, right? So kind of have to ask the questions like, what's really going on?
one more album I wanted to talk about was your 2020 trio album, The Theory Conspiracy. First off, before we even dive into the music, I love that name, The Theory Conspiracy. What inspired the name?
I think just conversations about what do you call this band, right? And then they always start with like the kind of corny names like, oh, the weaving monkeys, or the I don't know, the omnidirectional wizards, or like something stupid like that. And you start thinking about like puns and wordplay and whatnot. And, I love me a good conspiracy theory. Not so much these days. I'm kind of, it's kind of lost its glamour. But
when a lot of them start coming true.
Yeah, it gets to that point. Like, I'm tired of even playing the game anymore of like it's right there, nobody sees it. Like, at this point, it's like, come on, like, what are we, like, you're crazy not to. It was just kind of that idea of like, conspiracy theory, but theory is the common word here, music theory.
Yeah.
And there's some videos online about like 440 and, whatever BS, like, the lizard people change, it from 338 to 440 or whatever ridiculous theory there is. And that now we're hearing music in a frequency that, lowers our IQ or whatever the hell, you hear some crazy ideas. So it's like, well, that's the theory conspiracy. There's a conspiracy around music theory and tuning. And eventually we just came to like, you know what, that's got to be the name, The Theory Conspiracy. Like, we're kind of playing off of those themes, and that's what we talk about backstage, or that's what I ramble about backstage. I think the other guys just sit there and try not to laugh, but I'm
not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you because I love it. Yeah. So the actual album, like, there's a lot of, the tracks are all very different from each other, but it's still all very you. I know that sounds really lame to say, but I don't, like, you have a layered approach. Like, you have a lot of different keyboard sounds, a lot of different synth. You got your wife Jamie on vocals. It's not your typical sound, but it's all awesome. Just wondering like what your process was for creating that music.
We really wanted to make an album. We didn't want to just make a collection of songs. We wanted to craft something that told a story, that had an aesthetic to it, and we were really trying to fill in like this hour-long space, or however long it is, and construct something fun. So everybody contributed their own music, and we had this process of trying different pieces and working through them and playing them live, and then picking like, this one seems to really work, or this one's perfect for the album, or this one's really in place. And then I think we were also writing music for the album. Once we had an idea of the direction we were going, we all started writing music. So I know, like, I wrote the tune Amakua, which was kind of an attempt to create like a composition that unravels little by little. That's really stiff in terms of the writing, and that starts to unravel. But that isn't jazz, or that isn't rock, but that's just kind of its own world. So that was kind of the approach. We were just trying to construct something that had a narrative to it, and everybody was contributing to it, which gave it a real diversity. And then the final layer to it was we wanted to spend extra time at the studio just creating. So there was also a couple things that we just worked on at the studio, or people came in with sketches, and we just wanted to add that element of spontaneity and bringing that to the record, which is a very hip hop thing, by the way. Like DJ Premier, like, he talks about, crafting one of the singles right at the end. Like, you work on the whole album, and then you get in there and you create one last song that's like encapsulates everything. And it's like,
that's cool.
Yeah, we don't want to just come into the studio and have it all figured out. Like, let's figure some out at the studio. Like, let's not be so methodical. And so we spent all the budget really on just studio time more than anything.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it, I think. We did something similar on the Bear Skinner album, which hasn't come out yet, that Ryan Clackner is on, that's coming out this year on our label. but you know, Alan wrote a bunch of music for it, but he was also like, the day of, I just want them to like improvise, like make shorter tracks just to see what happens, like just to give freedom. And like, it's like, yeah, we always need, you know, we're putting it on vinyl, so we always need like more music than we think we're going to need, like just to be safe. But it's also cool just to like having all those guys in a room and just seeing what happens without looking at a page of music. That was cool too. So I love that. I love that you did that.
Yeah, I mean, we got, you know, the unfortunate, like, the pandemic happened right when the album released, like a week after or something. And,
oh my God.
And it was just one of those things where, you know, the label kind of went offline for a little bit, and we all kind of went offline for a little bit, and we weren't able to really, we didn't promote it. We kind of just got system shocked, and everyone kind of switched directions, and we put the album out, and it just kind of lives there. But we're really proud of it, and we're really proud of the work that we did. And, you know, we didn't stay together as a band because, again, the pandemic, I think, like, people started going in different directions mentally. Yeah. And there was an intensity of momentum with the theory conspiracy. You know, I was really trying to drive it in a direction of trying to accomplish things quickly and basically outwork the competition by doing things faster, putting in more time, investing more money into it, and making certain moves that maybe other people would wait forever to make. And kind of when that momentum gets interrupted, and everyone sharing leadership of the band, like it kind of just fell apart. So I would love to get something started again, like a different project, a different band, and maybe approach it differently this time for sure. Not be as intense about it. And, you know, I was so intense. I was so driven and let's go, you know, like it was, yeah.
Very cool though. Sucks that, you know, the world events that no one can control, like fucked it up. But yeah, I'd love to hear something like that again, like what you create in the same like process. My last question is, I'm curious how you work. Your wife, Jamie, I've met her several times, singer, very talented singer. She's not just a singer, very talented. I want to know what it's like working with your wife, both musicians. How's that relationship go?
Yeah, so we kind of work very sparsely because, again, two very different directions in terms of what we do and what we're interested in. But the things where we pair up are really interesting. Like, earlier on, so one thing is she works with a couple wedding bands and has really developed, you know, her place in that world and band leads and whatnot. But early on, we would do these kind of small ensemble corporate gigs where we would play either duo or trio or quartet. And that was always a lot of fun because we do a mix of jazz, and she's such a great rock singer and pop singer and things like that. Her parents had a cover band where they covered rock and pop in Orange County for decades at like the same bar. So she grew up singing, you know, top 40, and she's so good at it. Me, of course, I'm so much more into jazz and hip hop and the avant-garde. So early on, the only time we were really working was to like gig. When I was working with DJ Premier at the studio, there were times where we just needed a vocalist, and Jamie, you know, she executes. She's the executioner. Yeah. She comes in, she gets it done. Don't have to tell her much. Don't have to prepare much. And she kind of has this advantage of not really knowing much about what's going on, or sometimes even the artist that we're working with, you know, and it helps because she just comes in. It's a gig. She does the work. She sings. They love it. She ends up on the record. So
that's awesome.
You know, we're on like a Liam Gallagher record together, and she's on the Nas album on the single Get Ready. And she's done some work with Brady and Marco Polo. So yeah, we've worked together in that capacity. Like, I'm recording some jingles for the Joe Button podcast and a couple things like that, where we've just worked at the apartment recording stuff together.
Yeah.
So that's about the extent of the work. Like, we don't, on the Theory Conspiracy, we had that song Battle Royale, which we were like wanted to do like a anime drum and bass vibes. with lyrics and vocals, and she understands that world really well. And then of course we have a baby, so we work together as a family, of course.
Yeah.
But that's about the extent of it. Like, she really focuses on her. She's a content creator. She's huge on TikTok. Like, 350,000 followers or whatever. Jamie Holmes, just type it in, and she talks about movies and film, and that's her world. And I just let her run that world, and I'm in my world.
That's very cool. I'm always curious with other couples because, obviously Alan and I work together, but people that don't know us very well, they're like, oh, you guys play in bands together? And I'm like, no, definitely not. Like, same thing, two different worlds. I went way more like rock, after during college. And
I think it should be organic. Like, I don't like anything forced. I'm not a fan of doing anything that's just because you're my wife or you're my friend, or because we play in a band together here. I don't like forced situation. It should always be organic to the situation.
100%.
So, but we'll definitely be, we have plans on working on some stuff together in the future, like maybe cutting a like a jazz record with like a more classic sound, and developing something like that in the future. So that would be really nice. But yeah, you have some couples that really do work together, right? Like, they just make music together, and
I don't know how they do it and not kill each other, but
maybe they do kill each other. I think most of them are dead, actually. So it's
a little dark on that note.
No, I'm just kidding.
Totally kidding. Well, listen, man, I really appreciate you coming on. For people that want to follow you and what you got coming out, where's the best place to follow you, I guess?
Really nowhere right now, like Instagram. Just follow me on Instagram. I'm trying to keep things updated. You can follow me on TikTok too, but I haven't been posting. I was posting. I do some other stuff that's not really music related, but it's not part of this conversation, so I don't even want to get into it. That I have some social media stuff on and whatnot. But music wise, just follow me on Instagram. Keep updated with what DJ Premier and Brady Watt are doing, because I'm in there. Nice. And just stay tuned. I'm always working on stuff, and my thing is I like to be behind the scenes. I like to be working on the thing, so I don't want to be followed too much these days.
So don't follow you.
but I really appreciate the conversation, though.
Yeah,
I'm always down to go down the rabbit hole.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please visit birchgrove.io. It's the home base for our record label, Birch Grove Media. You could buy a vinyl record or a digital album and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive notifications about future events and releases. Also visit podfuelmedia.com. I'm one of the owners of this company, and if you like how this podcast was produced, we do that for our clients: audio, video edits, syndication, consulting, and startup for a new podcast. So book a call with us and we'll get your podcast going right away. You can also go to buymeacoffee.com/birchgrovemedia and leave us a tip if you'd like. Thank you very much.